You ever get judged in under 5 seconds by somebody who doesn't know a thing about you? I did on a rainy night, pulled over on a dark street, hands on the wheel, heart steady, while a cop decided what kind of person I must be. And the wildest part is this. Less than 12 hours later, that same man walked into my courtroom, looked up at the bench, and realized the woman he cuffed the night before was the judge presiding over his case. Yeah, that happened. I wasn't born important, not even close. I grew up in a part of town where people don't ask what you do for a living, they ask who your mama is and whether you mind your business. I worked my way out the slow way. Night classes, student loans, public defender shifts that lasted longer than daylight years of watching people get dismissed because of how they looked or where they stood. I didn't become a judge because somebody opened a door for me. I became a judge because I kept knocking until my knuckles metaphorically bled. So when I say I know what it feels like to be underestimated, I'm not talking theory. I'm talking lived experience. That night, I'd gone back to my old neighborhood for a family gathering after a funeral. You know the kind. Folding chairs, paper plates, laughter a little too loud because nobody wants to sit quietly with grief. By the time I left, it was close to midnight, rain coming down in that steady, cold rhythm that makes the streetlights blur. I was exhausted, emotionally wrung out wearing a hoodie and a cap because I didn't feel like being recognized, didn't feel like being Your Honor, just felt like being Mariah for a few hours. My car, though, didn't blend in. It was a restored vintage coupe, deep burgundy, polished enough to catch light even in the rain. I'd saved years for that thing. It wasn't flashy to me. It was proof that patience pays off. About 3 blocks after I left, I noticed headlights behind me. At first I thought nothing of it, then they stayed. Close. Too close. Riding my bumper like they were testing my nerves. I tapped my brakes lightly, just a polite signal. The lights didn't back off. Instead, they edged closer, bright beams flooding my rear view. Then suddenly, red and blue everywhere splashing across wet pavement. I exhaled, slow, pulled over into a well-lit bus stop lane, hands on the wheel, where they could see them. I've presided over enough cases to know how this goes. The officer walked up with a kind of swagger that told me he'd already made up his mind about me before he reached the window. He knocked on the glass with his flashlight, not gently, more like he was knocking on a door he planned to kick in. Roll it down all the way, he said. I did. Evening, officer. Is there a problem? I asked, calm and clear. He shined the light straight into my eyes, not searching, just asserting. License and registration. Now. I told him it was in my bag on the passenger seat and that I was going to reach for it. His jaw tightened like I'd insulted him. Keep your hands where I can see them. I said I am. I'm letting you know my movement so you don't misunderstand. That's when his expression changed. You could almost hear the click in his head, like something about me not sounding nervous flipped a switch. Step out of the vehicle, he snapped. I blinked. For a traffic stop? He leaned closer. I smell marijuana. I actually let out a breath through my nose because it was so predictable. That's not accurate, I said quietly. There's nothing like that in this car. He stiffened. You calling me a liar? And before I could answer, he pulled the door open and rain spilled in. Out. Now. So I stepped out. Cold water hitting my neck shoes on wet asphalt, his hand already gripping my shoulder like I might bolt. Turn around. He spun me toward the hood, metal cold against my palms. I have identification, I said steady. If you look at it, you'll see my name. Mariah Langston. I'm a county judge. He laughed. Loud, sharp, dismissive. Sure you are. His partner, a younger guy, was looking at my registration and muttered, The name matches. The officer cut him off instantly. People steal paperwork all the time. Then he cuffed me. Tight. 1 click past necessary. Pain shot through my wrists, but I didn't react. I just said, You're making a mistake. He leaned close and whispered, You picked the wrong night to drive through my town, sweetheart. Now, I've heard a lot of things in my career, but that word sweetheart, said like that, not kind, not friendly, just small and dismissive, that told me everything about how he saw me. Not as a citizen, not as a person, as a problem. He put me in the back of his cruiser and joked with his partner on the drive like I wasn't even there. At the station, he walked me in like a prize catch. Someone asked what he had. He said, Grand theft. She thinks she's a judge. A couple officers chuckled. I stood there, soaked wrists burning, and said clearly, My name is Mariah Langston. I am a judge. The desk sergeant actually looked up when I said it. He studied my face a second too long. I could tell he felt something was off. But the arresting officer just smirked and said, She's crazy. Booker. They fingerprinted me. took my photo, processed me like I was just another file. When they offered my phone call, the officer leaned in the doorway and said, "Better call someone who cares." I dialed my attorney friend Dana. When she picked up, I told her what happened. She said she'd call the chief, fix it immediately. I told her no. She thought I'd lost my mind. I said, "Listen, carefully. Don't bail me out yet." She paused. Why I lowered my voice? Because that officer testifies in my courtroom in the morning. Silence. Then she whispered, "Oh." I said, "If you fix it tonight, it disappears. I want him confident when he walks in tomorrow. I want him comfortable. I want him absolutely certain he's untouchable." She laughed softly and said, "You're scary when you're calm." I said, "Meet me at the courthouse at 7 with a suit." They locked me in a holding cell overnight. Concrete bench humming fluorescent lights that smell you never forget once you've been in a place like that. There was a young girl in the corner shivering, maybe 19. She looked at me and said, "You don't look like you belong here." I told her nobody belongs there. She asked what I was in for. I said, "Driving while underestimated." She laughed once and then told me about that officer, how people in her neighborhood knew him by name, how they crossed the street when they saw his patrol car. I listened. And the more I listened, the clearer my thoughts got. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about pattern, about habit, about a man who thought authority meant permission. So I sat there all night, back straight, hands folded, rehearsing questions in my head the way some people count sheep. Morning came slow. When they finally opened the door and said I was cleared to leave, my body was stiff, but my mind was sharp. Dana was waiting with coffee and clothes. We drove straight to the courthouse. I used the private entrance, nodded to security, went into chambers, showered, changed, pulled on my robe. And I know people romanticize that garment, but let me tell you something honest. It's not magic fabric. It doesn't make you wiser or kinder, but it does remind you of your responsibility. When I zipped it up, I felt ready. Out in the hallway, the officer, the same one, was laughing with the prosecutor, looking rested, confident, like the night before had been nothing but a story to tell his buddies. His partner stood off to the side, looking uneasy. When court was called and I stepped out to the bench, the room stood. I didn't rush, I didn't glare, I just walked. And when I looked up, his face changed. Not a little, completely. Color drained, shoulders stiff, eyes wide. He knew. You could see the moment recognition hit him. It was like watching someone realize the roller coaster doesn't stop once it starts. The case began normally. He testified about his arrest of a driver, said he observed signs of intoxication, followed procedure, all that. The prosecutor nodded along. The defense attorney got ready to cross-examine, but I raised my hand. "One moment," I said. I turned to the officer. "You stated you're trained to observe accurately." "Yes." "You can identify valid identification." "Yes." "You follow proper procedure." "Yes." Then I said, "Last night around midnight, did you stop a burgundy coupe on Henson Avenue?" His lips parted. Prosecutor jumped up, objected. I overruled him. "Answer." He said yes. I asked if he ran the plate before arresting the driver. Silence. I asked again. He whispered no. I asked if the driver identified herself. Yes. Told him her name. Yes. Told him her occupation. Yes. Then I asked, "And how did you respond?" He didn't answer. So I said calmly, "Let the record reflect. The witness is silent. The woman he arrested last night was me." You could feel the air shift in that room. People straightened. Papers stopped moving. I explained what happened. The cuffs, the dismissal, the fabricated suspicion. He stammered, "I didn't know it was you." And I said, "Exactly. That's the problem. You didn't treat me with respect because you didn't think I mattered. So why should this court trust your judgment about anyone else?" Then I dismissed the case based on unreliable testimony. The bailiff escorted him out. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't need to. Authority doesn't have to shout. Now here's where it gets complicated, and this is the part people argue about. Some folks said I did exactly what justice demands. Others said I crossed a line, that I let it get personal. The story spread. Opinions flew, debate started about whether I should have stepped aside immediately instead of questioning him myself. And I'll be real with you. I've thought about that, because maybe the bigger issue isn't what I did. Maybe the bigger issue is that it took a judge in handcuffs for anyone to pay attention. You know what I mean. So I want to ask you something honestly. If you were in my place, what would you have done? Would you have handled it quietly, or would you have done exactly what I did and let the truth show itself in open court? And have you ever seen someone get judged wrong just because of how they looked, what they wore, or where they were standing? Tell me about it in the comments. I read them and I really do want to hear your stories. And if you want more real-life stories like this, the kind that make you think about power, fairness, and the moments that change everything, hit like, subscribe, and stick around. Because sometimes justice isn't loud, it's not flashy. Sometimes it's just the truth finally being seen.